Hello.
Hi, Christine. How are you this afternoon?
Hi, Linda. I'm well. How are you?
I'm good.
Good, good. So, thank you for joining us on this episode 2 of In the Field. My name is Christine Billinger, and today I'm chatting with Lynda Bloom. She is a Canadian geologist. You have a very impressive resume, so I'm going to mention just a few of them here. So, you are the president and CEO of Analytical Solutions, which is your consulting company. You're also a world expert in assay methods. And I believe you're still heavily involved in the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada, if I'm correct.
Well, actually, it's been a couple of years since I was on the board. I was on the board for
Okay.
3 terms, 9 years, which was probably enough.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I was
yeah,
very pleased. The year before, I received their Distinguished Service Award, which was quite
yeah,
neat.
yeah. So long time involvement in the mining industry and geology in Canada, for sure. So today we came to talk about innovations in mining. But before we get into that, I wanted to talk just a little bit more about like your company and who you are and what you do exactly, in case people don't know who you are.
Somebody who doesn't know who I am. Oh, so, no, so I did study both geology and chemistry, which sort of gave me a rather unique niche because a lot of geologists don't like chemistry and they don't like numbers very much. Geology in general is a more descriptive and creative science, and
Mhm.
it's lots
Yeah.
of fun. What happened was I did a master's at Queen's, and then I started doing a lot of field work as an exploration geochemist. Actually, what was interesting, my very first job, because it was in the early 80s and there weren't a lot of girls in the business, I first got
Imagine.
hired to go to an exploration office in Saskatoon and be the librarian. Um,
Okay.
so I organized all the books. They let me go out in the field and play at being an exploration geochemist. So my advice there is just take whatever job they give you and you'll find something that fits. So other than career advice, I ended up wearing a lot of hats, and part of that is the mining industry is so cyclical, and you're so likely to be out of work. You have to be quite open-minded about how you define yourself.
Okay.
After the opportunity to work across Canada, doing exploration geochemistry. So just to sort of give some background, so mineral exploration, is the very beginning of the mining industry. So you got to find something before you can mine it.
Yep.
We certainly have hundreds of years of history with finding mines and bringing them into production. So that involves a lot of different possible kinds of studies, very much surface oriented. So you might collect rocks, you might collect stream sediments or soils. People collect dust, they collect plant parts, and then what you hope is that the chemistry then gives you some indication of what's buried below.
Mhm.
And it's a little complicated because you have to know all the different processes for how the metals moved in the environment. So maybe 30 years ago, we were precursor environmental geoscientists.
Yeah.
So, no, and it's just fascinating. It's a fascinating study. But again, because that work comes and goes, it's all about what's the price of metals, how easily can the thousands of junior mining companies raise financing. Um,
Mhm.
and as I said, it's cyclical. So I also worked at laboratories. I managed a commercial lab with about 50 employees. I ran public companies.
Mhm.
And as I did sales, I mean, I just kept reinventing myself. But I was really lucky, and I was always able to find some kind of work in the mining space.
Yeah. And you have your own company now, which is a consulting
I've
company.
had the
Yeah.
company's been registered since 1986.
Okay.
So yes, after I had been fired for the fourth time, I thought maybe the mining industry isn't a place where you're likely to collect a pension, and so maybe I better do something about making sure I have consistent employment and consulting, and it's worked very well. I mean, one of the reasons is there aren't a lot of geochemists, and
Yeah.
so have a tendency to stand out in the crowd, and when somebody needs your help, they come to some of the few geochemists that are around.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely an advantage. And so, I know what your consulting company focuses on is doing lab mining audits, right?
Well, yeah. So bigger picture, it's
Yeah.
about assay quality control. So
Hmm.
not everybody would remember, but at the end of the 1990s, there was a huge scandal called Bre-X.
Hmm.
And in Bre-X, it turns out what they had done was they had added gold to over 30,000 samples. And then when the lab analyzed them, they produced the assays, but they didn't realize, it was a commercial lab, they didn't realize that somebody had added gold.
Okay.
And this was like, there are many scams in the mining industry, but this one was over the top. The share price had gone from, it was a junior company based in Alberta, from 10 cents to over $200, $300 a share. And
Wow.
everybody owned shares in Bre-X, like farmers and gas. Like you'd line up at the LCBO to buy a bottle, and people be talking about Bre-X and how much higher
Yeah.
it's going to go. And then one day, it turns out the whole thing was falsified.
Yeah.
And then, as in the sort of typical regulatory environment, they decide to close the barn door after the cows got out. So they implemented something called the securities exchanges in Canada implemented something called National Instrument 43101.
Yeah.
And that's where they said you have to include checks on your assays. So if you're going to disclose the information to the public, you have to be able to demonstrate you did everything possible to ensure that the results were correct.
Hmm.
So that means people geologists started adding into their sample flow standards. So these are like crushed pulverized rocks where you know the answer. So if you send that material to the lab and you were expecting 2% copper and they report 3% copper, you know that your sample assays are probably wrong also. So you
Right.
stop and you don't report that to the public. You do some additional checks. You have to investigate, and also something called blank. So you send in materials that are barren, and then again, if they report values you thought it was supposed to be 0 and it gives you a number, you have to investigate that also. So that completely changed really my focus for the last 20 years, because all of a sudden companies needed to implement these quality control programs. They've never done it before. I dealt with everyone from majors to little tiny companies and everybody in between, just helping them figure out mechanisms to meet these regulatory requirements. And that's where a lot of my work ended up being.
Yeah.
And the reason you want to be careful doing that is so let's suppose we find something, then we do a lot of drilling, and we generate certainly tens of thousands of samples, maybe 100,000 samples from these drilling programs. And then what we have to do is something called the resource estimate. And this is really what triggers financings.
Yeah.
This is what the regulatory regulators are really interested in, that they're done properly.
Yeah.
So a big part of it is to make sure that the numbers that go into all the other assumptions that are made about geology and the mining method in the future and costs, at least the building blocks are right.
Hmm.
So that's where we start. And then sometimes what happens is you've been doing all this quality control and you notice you're not getting the numbers that you're supposed to. And that might trigger a lab audit or a lab visit or some kind of, let's call it intervention. And a lot of the more major mining, so that's, at the exploration stage. At the exploration stage, you're sending your samples to commercial laboratories. And some of these laboratories are huge. I mean, they do, there's been a lot of consolidation in the last 25 years. I mean, some of the labs in Vancouver easily do 10 or 15,000s for gold a day.
Wow.
Every single day. So I would say they have innovated a lot. There is a lot that's automated in terms of how they implement their internal quality control, how they move their data from the instrumentation to a database, get it. So there's a lot, and then Then what happens is, let's say you find something, you get all your assays in, they're done correctly, you get a resource estimate that's favorable, you get the financing to build your $1 billion mine, and now you're mining.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're producing, and you might be producing anything from 1,000 tons a day to 120,000 tons a day.
Yeah.
You want to know that the material you're processing, so that you have mineralized material, stuff that's economic, that's going to make you money,
Yes.
and you're sitting in a bunch of stuff that's not going to
Not
make
good.
money.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to differentiate, right? So if you're going to dig it up, you don't want to spend the money having it processed to recover the metal, unless there's metal there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to send dirt, barren
Yeah.
stuff. You need to recover some metal so that you can pay for all the costs associated with it. So every mine has a lab, and those labs might do 200 samples a day.
Right.
And it's much more difficult for them to operate. They're not, they're in very remote locations. It's very difficult to find people to run those that are highly qualified.
Mm-hmm.
It's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what happened in the last probably 10 years is, because so many of the commercial labs are also what's called ISO 17025 accredited.
Yeah.
So they have heavy duty auditors who are certified auditors. I'm not, right? I just really do a review. So, and those are incredibly thorough, detailed, lots of measurements, and they'll be there for the week. Like usually someone's only willing to pay me to go somewhere for a day.
Yeah.
Half a day. So I haven't been to, I will tour the commercial labs. They're very difficult to audit without, additional tools. And somewhat you rely on this accreditation that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the mine labs are ripe for improvement.
Okay.
And they're, and mine sites are their own little world. And that's where it does feel things move a little bit more slowly in terms of innovation. What I decided was because I will do these mine lab visits, somebody will all of a sudden have a problem. They go, you have to be there. So one of the things I wanted to do was automate that for myself, because I had paper copies, and then I would type all my answers in. I've been developing for over 20 years a checklist, and the checklist has over 400 items on it.
Right.
And it was designed really, it was originally designed for a major mining company. Their idea was their own geologists would do all these lab visits, because they're international and they've got labs hidden away in parts of Africa and Asia that nobody wants to visit, including myself. So we developed this checklist, and the idea was the questions on the checklist would be clear enough that a geologist, perhaps with the assistance of a lab manager, could answer all the questions, and they're designed so you answer yes or no.
Yeah.
And the right answer is yes. So technically, if you just ran your finger down the column and you saw a bunch of yeses, then you would have more confidence. And then so instead of sort of doing a paper copy, then entering it into Excel, then formatting it, I was able to, I did quite a bit of research, and I did select Field Eagle for an app to help with that. And we've been working on that for a while. It's worked fairly well. Well, let me put it this way. It works really well for us internally. I haven't had as much interest in other people using it. I still think they like the personal touch, but I just think it's such a great solution.
Yeah.
Because for me to make a visit somewhere is incredibly expensive by the time you pay for my time to travel and anyways, and it's just, this way the thing that used to take me the most time is I would take photos. So I'd have my piece of paper I'm writing on, I'd have my camera, I'm trying to take pictures, and then when I get home, I have to find the picture,
put it all
I
together
put it in the right place, and got to remember why I took the picture. So all of that happens in Field Eagle, and it certainly makes it much less tedious to write up.
Yeah,
Really
yeah,
is.
definitely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So it helps
that's
you to automate and digitize the
but
process.
where I would like to take it is to have people, in Australia, apparently one of their regulations are slightly different. They're supposed to do lab visits on a regular basis, each company.
Okay.
And so, we did just work on one, that an Australian client of a Canadian consulting firm wanted the consulting firm to visit the Vancouver lab that the Australian company was using for their samples coming from Ecuador.
Okay.
Okay. And so it was a perfect solution,
Hmm. That's
right?
awesome. Yeah.
To have somebody who wasn't from, so I didn't have to go to Vancouver. They didn't have to. They used the Field Eagle app
Yeah.
with all the correct questions to ask.
Your templates
Um,
that you design, right?
yeah, and
Yeah.
and they went for 3 hours to the lab. And the guy in Vancouver visited the Vancouver lab and sent the report to the Australians for their Ecuador project.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's one of the exciting things about the mining industry. It is so international.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because like there's a lot of talk about innovation in mining, but it seems like there's not a lot of adoption of these sort of newer technologies.
It's slow. Okay, so on the mining side, they're incredibly cautious.
Hmm.
It's very much a manufacturing production environment,
Hmm.
um, and they really have to deliver X number of tons with X amount of metal and recover. It's very tight. Um, on the exploration side, there's huge innovation. Like
Yeah.
there's always some new geophysical method. There's always right now everybody's moving towards artificial intelligence because
Yeah.
when you have exploration data, you've got geophysics and you've got geochemistry and you've got I don't know many layers
Yeah.
of information. So people are really working quite hard to use something like AI.
Yeah.
And we continue to innovate in terms of, so now we get, it's cost effective to do something like more than 60 elements per sample,
Hmm.
at one of the commercial labs.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that's been a problem just in the last couple of years. So when I ran a lab, if we didn't deliver results within 5 days, we would have very angry phone calls from clients. People
Okay.
now are waiting 5 weeks to like 3 months for results. I mean, this was a bit of a spike so this was,
Hmm.
a bit of a spike because price of gold, price of copper, price of lithium, price of lithium doubled last year.
Yeah.
So when there's that kind of excitement in the market, the companies raise funds and they do more sampling and they want more analyses.
Yeah.
And then
And
you get the
faster.
whole, yeah, well, quicker than 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So you'll find on the expiration side, yes, they're doing things that a lot of people are using handheld XRF,
Hmm. Yeah.
and that's been, I think there's been lots of uptake on that. The challenge with the XRF is the sample size.
Yeah.
The
And maybe,
handheld XRFs are only like I think it's like a 2 millimeter window.
and just in case somebody's watching, they don't know what that is, the XRF. Do you explain that?
So
And then,
X-ray fluorescence is
yeah.
I don't know. It's been you know what, they were using it in the war to analyze the metal of like German aircraft to know how to either
Yeah.
build aircraft in the UK or which plants to bomb or something. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's been around a
Been
really
around.
long time.
Yeah.
But now, and so it's very interesting because you shoot X-rays at any solid, and it will give you an answer for the range of elements and with
Yeah.
different concentrations. But and so what happens at a lab is you grind your sample really fine, and so
Hmm.
that means you might get a representative sample. Like you can take a big sample, grind it really fine, and then
Hmm.
you only have to analyze a small portion of that sample.
Hmm.
But if you're in the field and you want to analyze a rock, really all you can do is zap. The window is almost by mineral grade.
Yeah.
It was great for ID, and people do use it for general characteristics. And there are people who are using really, like, anyways, you can try and get the grain size down of your sample in the field
Hmm.
because you need some kind of guide. You can't wait 3 months for results because you need to know if the sample you picked up yesterday, you should go back and do more work at that site in the field, or is it time to move on to the next one? How do you can't wait 3 months or 3 weeks even.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is one, well, we're calling it a new method. It's called Photon Assay.
Yeah.
It's still not portable. I mean, the machine is a good 3 meters by 3 meters by 3 meters by 2 meters by 3 meters. I mean, it's,
Yeah.
you know,
And just in case people that don't know, so the photon assay is specifically for identifying gold, right?
yeah, they're hoping
Yeah.
to expand it. But,
Yeah.
I mean, just in terms of the timing, I mean, we just got our first unit in Canada in Val d'Or, Quebec, because there's lots of gold mining up there.
Yeah.
In February, maybe it was operational in March or April, but they were working on it in Australia for 15 years.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it doesn't, it's like rock and roll bands that say, people say they were an instant success, but they've had a 15-year career, right? I mean,
Yeah.
things don't always happen right away. And there were some issues with photon assay. It's a good example. The first question that they asked, the Australians asked, is they came. I was on a committee, a technical committee for the securities regulators, and what happened was the photon assay guys showed up and said, if a company uses this new method, will you accept the values? So I mean, they really wanted to start from the first principles to find
Okay.
out if it was commercially viable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the regulators say that's not their job, right? It's the companies, the technical people have to justify the use of new technologies.
Right. Right.
Yeah, but so and it can improve turnaround time, but it's like everything else. It still needs. It's very low on requirements for labor,
Hmm.
and especially skilled labor. But still, you need to find the people.
Yeah.
It's just as you can't find people to flip burgers or it's just right. Right, we're talking about right now, and
Yeah.
so the labs to find chemists or computer programmers or all the other skill sets that are required is really difficult.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting to hear. Like, I think, one of my next questions was going to kind of lead into this was that, like you said, there's not a lot of geochemists in the world right now. And so I'm sure that there's, up and coming, students who are interested in this field. So, what's the future of their workplace going to look like?
You know what? I still think mining mineral exploration is going to be cyclical. So
Yeah.
be prepared for a ride. When at one point in time in my career, when I was running a company, we were flying, and it was an upcycle, and we needed geologists. We were flying guys back and forth from Denmark. We were great
Okay.
geologists, but I
Yeah.
mean, we actually flew them back and forth from Denmark,
They had the skill
and they
set.
were and they were
Yeah.
very well paid. So, but there could be times when you're not employed. What's really changed, I think, for me on the geochem side is, I mean, geochemistry, a lot of people think about is early stage, doing a soil survey, putting dirt in the bag.
Yeah.
So it's a bit more complicated than that. And again, now people do a lot more with their data. First of all, we have a lot more data. We can have, like I said, up to 60 elements plus all kinds of other variables. Maybe we did some of the analyses in the field with our XRF.
Hmm.
We know a lot more about how we have to interpret the results with regards to landforms,
Hmm.
and so you might also be using satellite imagery to do your analysis. So it's there's a lot of skill sets that are required. All the GIS type software is really
Yeah.
important, and
Yeah.
statistics, right? So how do you know that the numbers you get back are anomalous and might be related to something like mineralization,
Hmm. Yeah.
or they're just background, they're just normal variation?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot. to me, it's a really fascinating field.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's really cool. All right. Yeah. So you can be reached for anybody who has questions about geochemistry, and we'll make sure that we share your LinkedIn information as well. Yeah. But that is our time today, and I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on and chatting with
Thank you for
us.
asking me. It's been
Well,
great.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thanks so much, and we have some comments there already. That's awesome. Yeah. So yeah, hopefully we can chat with you again. And thanks for mentioning our amazing product Field Eagle as well. We're so happy to have you using it. And yeah, thank you, Lynda.
Bye for now.